And we're live. Welcome to MMA Capital, number 4. I'm going to be breaking down UFC 261 and then breaking down next week's UFC Fight Night, Reyes versus Prochazka. Sorry, Eastern European names. I'm going to be your host, Ben. This is going to be my 4th video. I'm going to be giving my analysis and picks for UFC fights and then breaking them down the next week and then previewing next week's fights. Out of my 3 videos, I've hit on 4 of 5 for 2 of them, 2 of 4 for 1, but 2 of the fights on the main card were scrapped. So I'm now 4 of 5 on 2 of 3 of my weeks for 80%, which is pretty damn good. It's about what I wanted to hit on. This week had 3 title fights. UFC 261, the men's welterweight title, women's flyweight, and women's strawweight were all on the line, with fans in Jacksonville Arena with 18,000 fans present. It was electric. Some of the best performances I've ever seen, and dare I say, probably one of the best events of all time, if not the best event of all time. It was great seeing packed house, max capacity fans with COVID. I live in Florida. I think we're doing things right here with reopening things and getting back to normal. And it was electric seeing fans and seeing some of the best performances I've ever seen from a few dominant champions who are probably going to go down as some of the best fighters in UFC history, if not the best of all time. So it was electric watching it. Probably one of my favorite events of the last few years. And might just go down as one of the best events ever. Before we start, I want to show off this awesome Ruka shirt I got. Old school boxing shirt. It's supposed to be boxers from the late 1800s, if not early 1900s. Thought I'd share that. So yeah, let me get right into it. I predicted 4 of the 5 fights correctly. We had 2 kind of freak things with leg injuries in the first 2 fights, one worse than others. And yeah, let me get right into it. So to open up the main card, we had Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Croot. I had Anthony Smith by stoppage, either knockout or sub. I correctly predicted the knockout, air quotes, TKO. I had Smith winning coming into this fight. What happened was Smith hit Jimmy Croot with a low leg kick right behind the knee, which it appeared to tear not one but probably multiple ligaments in Jimmy Croot's leg. Unfortunately, it looked like it was both his probably knee, calf, and ankle. The inside of his leg, it looked like, was the muscles in his leg looked like they were moving and shifting in his leg, so the ref thankfully stopped it after the first fight, especially since Jimmy Croot is only 25 and probably the blue chip prospect at light heavyweight, probably one of the blue chip prospects in the entire promotion. So you can't let a 25-year-old guy go out there and fight on one leg, clearly with some serious ligament damage done. He was trying to put on a poker face, but he collapsed, I think, twice at the end of the first round, and you could see the ligaments in his legs moving around, so he probably had multiple complete tears in his leg. So unfortunately for Croot, that's going to halt his rise. He's 12-2 in MMA, absolute ox of a guy, specimen, and I think he has a bright future, but for now is Anthony Smith's day. These leg kicks, people are talking more and more, especially on shows like Joe Rogan, how prevalent these leg kicks and calf kicks are. I mean, they can completely shut down your leg or completely tear up ligaments. The thing is, you're kicking with your shin and just chopping up people's legs, their knee, behind their knee, their ankle, their calf. There's not a lot of meat on people's legs for the most part, so it does a ton of damage. You've seen it more and more. Two or 3 leg kicks in the first round can change the complete composure of the fight. And unfortunately for Croot, he looked like he tore a few ligaments. It's funny. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, top 5 welterweight in the UFC, was saying that on Joe Rogan's show that he actually tore every single ligament in his leg in a karate tournament when he slipped. He tore everything in his leg all at once. So it's unfortunate, and these leg kicks aren't going away anytime soon because they're so debilitating. So Smith got the first round TKO, air quotes. I mean, the ref had to stop it, so it goes down to TKO, and it was a good fight for the first 5 minutes. Both guys were swinging early and were in each other's faces, so it was disappointing. It couldn't go longer, but it was an entertaining first round, and good stoppage by the ref, because you can't let a 25-year-old blue chip prospect go out there and fight on literally one leg, unless it's for the title or a number one contenders fight. Probably the right thing to stop it. And then next, at middleweight, another freak leg injury happened, even worse than the first one. This is between Chris Weidman and Uriah Hall, both guys actually from New York, where I'm from. I had Weidman in this fight against Hall. It was technically a first-round TKO as well. In fact, it was even worse. Probably, honestly, the most gruesome injury I've ever seen in any sport. Chris Weidman, first strike thrown in a fight, threw a leg kick, tried to hit the back of Uriah Hall's knee, and his shin exploded, unfortunately. His shin exploded, and his leg pretty much snapped in half at the ankle in a way that her leg isn't supposed to bend. And what made it even worse, I guess Chris Weidman's so tough, I guess he thought he just maybe chipped his ankle or something, and he actually stepped on it, which it looks like made it significantly worse because it completely snapped his ankle. It's actually interesting, the same injury happened, except Weidman was on the blocking end, where Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva's second fight, checked a leg kick, and Anderson Silva's leg snapped at the ankle. Almost the exact same thing happened. So not only these leg kicks dangerous for the person who's receiving them, they're also dangerous throwing it. Valentina Shevchenko, who was one of the fights higher up on the card, said you have to be careful throwing the leg kicks, because, I mean, it's a freak thing, but we've seen this a few times. It can happen where, if you hit it wrong, it's a freak thing. It's probably well under 1% chance of happening, like 0.01% chance of happening. Of all the UFC fights, I think it's only happened 3 times in the UFC. Once to Anderson Silva, once to Chris Weidman, and to someone else. But probably the most gruesome injury I've ever seen. I mean, that'll probably be a career ender for Weidman. He's towards the end of his career, like a lot of former D1 wrestlers and a guy who's been wrestling since he was in diapers. He's gotten surgeries pretty much in every part of his body. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who I think is his brother-in-law, has said Weidman's had like 37 surgeries, including having like metal discs put into his neck. So think, unfortunately, for a UFC Hall of Famer, multiple-time middleweight champion, I think he should retire. I think that'll be a career ender. I was talking about it with one of my friends yesterday. An injury like that, realistically, it'll probably take you 2 or 3 full years to come back from, and then all of your muscles will essentially atrophy from not being able to use them. And for Weidman, like a lot of former D1 All-Americans, his body is already completely broken down from wrestling in high school and college, and then now fighting in the UFC. Same thing happened to Ben Askren. Ben Askren gets clowned in MMA, but is one of, if not the best, college wrestler of all time. I think Ben Askren was a multiple-time national champion in wrestling at Missouri, and I think he actually won the award for best college wrestler twice in college. Ben Askren was another guy whose body completely broke down. He's had both hips replaced. He's gotten surgery in every part of his body. And that's one reason why Ben Askren looks so damn stiff later in his career, and in that Jake Paul boxing fight. I mean, guys literally gotten surgery on every part of his body multiple times. So Weidman, unfortunately, one of the best middleweights fighters of all time, a guy who's from Long Island, kind of a, dare I say, the pride of Long Island for mixed martial arts. I think he should retire, because that was pretty gruesome, man. Enjoy your health with your family. You want to be able to walk and function. I don't think he's even 40 yet, so just retire, man. It's unfortunate, but that should be a career ender, and I don't think Dana White will even let Weidman fight again. Doesn't matter how tough he is, man. That was one of the worst injuries I've ever seen. A similar thing happened to Dak Prescott last year, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, but he at least had, the football leggings and a sock on, so you couldn't see it quite as well. But this man's ankle snapped in half. So speedy recovery, and I hope he enjoys his retirement and prioritizes his health, because that's, the definition of a catastrophic injury. Forget tearing a knee or meniscus. I mean, your ankle shattering at the hip is bad. And unfortunately for Uriah Hall, This is a grudge match. Both of these guys fought, I think it was either amateurs or like early pros, where it's pretty much an amateur MMA fight when they started. And Weidman got the better of them. Both guys, for older guys, looked like they were in phenomenal shape. Weidman's physique looked as good as it has in a long time. It's unfortunate, but this is the fight game. Sometimes freak stuff happens, and like I said, I think he should retire, and I don't think Dana White should even let him fight again, because prioritize your health, man. I don't think people understand how banged up some of these D1 wrestlers are by the time they get into the UFC and how damaged their bodies are. I know Dan Henderson, who fought until he was 46, Chael Sonnen, one of his former training partners, said he couldn't bend any part of his body or stretch it all from being a former D1 wrestler and Olympic wrestler. So wish the best for Weidman. Unfortunate for both guys. You don't want to see your MMA opponent's leg shatter, and absolutely catastrophic injury. So hopefully they can turn Hall around quick, because I know he's on a 3 or 4 winning streak, and he looks great physically for an older guy. So hopefully they can turn Hall around and get him some fights, because I know he wants a title shot. So yeah, onto the 3 title fights of the evening. 3 of the best and most entertaining title fights I've ever seen. I think it speaks to how strong women's MMA is, and how strong the women MMA fighters are compared to pretty much every other women's sport. No disrespect, but I mean, people were going fucking nuts for Valentina Shevchenko and Namajunas, So yeah, let me get into it. So I actually called all 3 title fights correctly. I don't think any of these fighters were like massive favorites. I think Rose Namajunas in one of the title fights was actually an underdog. So hopefully these videos get picked up on the YouTube algorithm. These videos start getting some views, because I could have made some people money, especially on these title fights. So yeah, let me get into it. So first we had women's flyweight. It was between Valentina Shevchenko. I broke it down in depth in my last video that Shevchenko, in my opinion, might be the best and most well-rounded fighter in the UFC, regardless of gender or weight class. She's a black belt in Taekwondo, black belt in Judo, master sport in boxing, kickboxing, and Muay Thai, multiple-time Muay Thai world champion, has one of the sickest six-packs I've ever seen on any athlete, men or women. I mean, she has like a hard six-pack. It looks like a turtle shell. In my opinion, one of the best athletes in the world, regardless of gender or sport. I follow her on Instagram, and she literally trains 24/7, no exaggeration, has absolutely no distractions, speaks 3 languages, amazing woman in person. And she drew Jessica Androsch, who's a specimen as well. Jessica Androsch, former strawweight champion, has actually fought in 3 weight classes, which is, I think she's one of the only women in the UFC who's fought in 3 weight classes. Flyweight, bantamweight, and strawweight. She's the former strawweight champion at 115. She beat Rose Namajunas to win the belt, and then lost it in her first defense to Weili Zhang, who's also on the card. But this going in, the narrative was this is going to be Valentina Shevchenko's toughest fight. Andrade is like 5'1", 125. After rehydrating and eating some food, she probably goes up to like 140 to 150 pounds. And I mean, she's listed at 5'1", but Andrade looks like she could really be like 4'11" or 5 foot. That 5'1" listing could be a little generous, and she's a absolutely ferocious fighter. Legit one-punch knockout power. Has knocked out multiple women in the UFC by like literally just picking them up and suplexing them and slamming them on their head. That's actually how she won the title. So an absolute specimen. I mean, she's jacked. She's short and tanky, and just an absolute ferocious fighter. So this is supposed to be Shevchenko's like toughest title fight to date. You know, a lot of people, myself included, thought coming in Androsch was going to try to bulldog her, just rush her, throw big shots, and try to slam Shevchenko, and Shevchenko would have to, like, kind of sit on the outside and kickbox or make it a technical kickboxing fight. But, I mean, the unexpected happened. Shevchenko bullied Androsch. I mean, just manhandled her. She must have hit 6 or 7 hard body lock takedowns in the first 2 rounds. Just wrapped her arms around her clasp and just was tossing Androsch, which no one was expecting. The 3 gentlemen in the commentating booth, Daniel Cormier, Joe Rogan, and John Anik, were shocked, as was the crowd. I mean, Shevchenko kind of bullied a bully for a woman who's supposed to be a specimen and, just kind of a bruiser in there. She was just tossing her around, manhandling her on the ground, which no one expected. I think Andrade is a legitimate black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from, like, a legit Jiu-Jitsu school in Rio de Janeiro. I think she has some legitimate, like, black belt credentials. And she had no answer for Shevchenko's wrestling or ground game, which is shocking. Usually these black belts from Brazil are legit, and she got manhandled on the ground. Shevchenko, I follow her on Instagram, and when they showed her training, she was wearing, like, these athletic clothes, long sleeves and leggings. So I didn't see quite how big she looked going into the fight, because I would say this is probably the heaviest Shevchenko has weighed in a flyweight title fight. I guess to compensate for Andrade being so strong, Shevchenko looked like she weighed at least 140, if not 150 pounds. I mean, her muscles were just bulging, which for some of her previous fights, she's been rather lean and cut, but she looked massive in there to compensate, to match up with Andrade. And I don't think anyone saw Shevchenko just bullying Andrade, just pretty much picking her up and tossing her around like schoolyard moves, and got her in a crucifix, which is what you go horizontal over someone's head essentially, and just elbowed her to get the finish early in round 2. I, like a lot of people, were shocked because Andrade is a scary woman. She's short, but she has legit one-punch knockout power and has finished multiple people in the UFC, like, in one punch or just slamming women on their head. So I don't think anyone saw Shevchenko kind of out physicaling her, just body locks. It wasn't even, I think a lot of people thought Shevchenko could have knocked her out counter-punching or staying on the outside and chipping away, but instead it was just takedown after takedown and a masterclass performance. So respect to Shevchenko getting the early second-round TKO in dominant fashion. I'm not sure if she took any damage, and I spoke about it in my last video, for someone who's regarded, as one of the most dominant champions of all time, regardless of gender or weight class. It was a masterclass, and I was surprised in the way she did it. That's, what separates dominant champions to, like, the next level, like the GOAT level, to, like, what, John Jones and GSP used to do back in the day. They would, like, out-wrestle wrestlers, out-kickbox strikers. It's incredible seeing a champ beat someone with their strengths, right? Not exploit their weaknesses. So I was super impressed. The fans loved it, and it was probably, a dominant champion's best performance so far. And sky's the limit. I mean, Shevchenko was only 33. I don't think she has any interest in, like, going up or down weight classes. I'm a fan of people staying in their own weight class and banging out their defenses. People will always, new contenders will always emerge. I'm not the biggest fan of trying to do the double champ thing and move up and down weight classes, because then you're not defending the belt that you have, which jams up the division, right? That can cause top contender fights not to happen. So I like how she's committed to staying in one weight class and just defending the belt, kind of old school. Like we saw Israel Adesanya, the middleweight champ, try to go up to light heavyweight and lose, and he could have defended the belt once or twice in that time span, like if he didn't take too much damage. So I'm a fan of people staying in their weight class. I'm not the biggest fan of the double champ thing, especially if you're like Conor McGregor, who became a champ in 2 divisions and didn't defend either belt, right? So I'd rather see people stay in their weight class than just defend that one belt. But amazing performance, one of the best performances I've ever seen in MMA, to be honest. So let's get into the next video. Sorry, the next fight. This is between Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang. Like I said, I predicted all 3 title fights correctly. I predicted this one correctly. I wanted Rose to win, and I thought she would win, but I thought it would be a tougher test. Weili Zhang won the belt in vicious fashion. I think she had a 30-second one-punch knockout of the champ at that time, Androsch, which no one saw coming, and then had probably the best women's MMA fight of all time with Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her first title defense. So people were high on Zhang. Zhang is a specimen for 115. I mean, God knows how much she weighs after cutting weight and rehydrating on fight night. She probably weighs like lean, huge 130, 135 probably, whereas Rose probably doesn't cut too much weight. I mean, Rose doesn't have much muscle, whereas Zhang is huge for 115, probably the biggest strawweight in UFC history, to be honest, in terms of like muscle mass. So I thought this was going to be a tough fight. I thought it was kind of going to be physical prowess and physical stats over like technique. Rose Namajunas has probably some of the best movement and most beautiful striking in MMA, with the exception of maybe someone like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who has like a legit karate background. I mean, she has some of the best movement and footwork that I've ever seen. And she got it done in surprising and dominant fashion. Just knocked Weili Zhang out with one kick. I think it was probably the first strike she really threw and committed to of the fight. Zhang hit Rose with a few leg kicks, and then Rose just hit a perfect lead roundhouse front kick to the head. I mean, one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest knockouts I've ever seen. Zhang literally didn't see it coming. She got absolutely starched. Absolute sniper shot from Rose. Rose went in, hit a few more punches. Ref stopped it. Zhang got hit so damn hard. I guess she didn't realize what had just happened or what was happening. She got up and was protesting it, and then I think she saw the highlight of her getting flatlined. I mean, it probably wasn't the most damaging head kick I've ever seen, but in terms of just a perfect, accurate head kick to get a knockout, I mean, it was maybe one of the cleanest head kick knockouts I've ever seen. Zhang just didn't see it coming. It knocked her clean out. She wasn't completely dazed and stumbling afterwards, but it shut off her lights completely for a few seconds, so much so that she was protesting it, and then she saw the highlight and was like, damn, I just got vaporized. So, respect to Rose Namajunas. I know she's been through a lot. I know a lot of Rose's performances come down how she feels that night, and if she believes in herself, and it looked like she came in motivated and, in the right headspace, and had maybe one of the best, if not the best, knockouts in UFC history in terms of precision. I mean, absolute perfect technique. And she has, dare I say, some of the most beautiful striking I've ever seen in MMA. So the sky's the limit for her, and I'm sure if you're a fan of her like myself, or anyone else, you're really happy for her. I mean, the crowd went crazy, and Joe Rogan was crying, congratulating her. So, huge win, emotional win for sure. And man, I think if she comes in the right headspace going forward, I'm just not sure who's going to beat her, because she won the title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I spoke about it in my video last week. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, at the time she lost to Rose, was literally the number one pound-for-pound fighter for women. And, if there was a men and women's list, she probably would have been top 3 or 5. Joanna at that point had become the most dominant women's champion of all time, just demolishing women. And Rose came in and knocked her out quick in their first fight, and then defended the belt to show she's for real. So Rose, a young fighter, and could be the champion for a long time. I don't think the way in which Weili Zhang lost, I think she needs to win like 1 of 3 fights to get another title shot. That may sound bold, but when you get one-shotted in your second title defense in dominant fashion, I think you need to win some fights. People were asking Dana White, will Zhang get an immediate rematch? And I don't think so. If you win the title via first-round quick knockout, and then you have an awesome fight, and then you get knocked out in one strike and really, like I said, get completely vaporized, then I think you need to win some fights. And I think that's what's gonna happen. I doubt she's gonna get an immediate rematch with how perfect Rose's performance was. I mean, it was one of the best performances of all time. I mean, she was light on her feet, and then hit the perfect shot. She must have practiced that, lead high kick hundreds, if not thousands of times, because, I mean, it was right on the button. I mean, I can't use the clips for, copyright purposes, but if you look at the knockout, you'd be like, wow, that was ninja stuff. I mean, the perfect strike to knock out a woman who I think Zhang was the favorite. So respect to Rose, and it was an emotional win as a fan, for a real fan favorite. So one of the best performances I've ever seen to knock out a scary champion like that in 1 minute and 18 seconds. Like I said, I mean, she got hit so damn hard. She must have been concussed. She didn't realize what was going on for a few minutes. So I'm sure Zhang is disappointed, but I think she needs to win some fights to come back. I don't think if you're a champ and you get one-shotted, you should get an immediate rematch, right? Not against someone who just completely starched you with one kick, right? So we'll see. Even Matt Hughes back in the day, or George St. Pierre, 2 of the welterweight goats, when they lost their titles, fluke or not, they had to fight a few times to get back in the mix. So, I think Zhang needs to win a few fights. I hope she takes some time off, because even though it doesn't look like the most crushing strike in the world, getting knocked out like that is not good for your brain and stuff, and mental health. So hopefully she gets I think it's the 6-month medical suspension or something, and takes some time, because I know she said she wanted to get back right in there, and I don't think the UFC should let her do that, right, when you get knocked out like that. So she'll have to win some fights, and I'd like to see Rose turn around and fight again soon, because she's definitely a fan favorite. And then this fight, I also predicted, like I said, I hit on all 3 title fights. My favorite fighter, the fighter who I said coming in, if he wins, should be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and he will be now after this performance. How accurately I called the main event with Usman and Masvidal. I hope this channel gets some views and people start watching, because, I said coming in, Usman's the best fighter in the world, the most dominant fighter in the world. And if he gets the win, he should be ranked number 1 pound for pound. I know Khabib Nurmagomedov was number 1, and he said maybe 2 or 3 months ago that now Usman should be number 1. And now Usman has finished his last 3 opponents. Broke Colby Covington's jaw, knocked out Gilbert Burns, out-wrestled, wrestle-fucked Jorge Masvidal, and then knocked Jorge Masvidal unconscious. I said in my video, I thought it would be another wrestle clinic. I know fans, especially casual fans, fucking idiots who support Masvidal and think Masvidal is the best MMA fighter of all time, hate seeing those wrestle clinic fights, but it takes 2 to tango. If one guy has, elite level wrestling like Usman does, a former D2 national champion of wrestling, and one guy has shit takedown defense and can't get up, well, it takes 2 to tango, right? It takes 2 parties. It's one guy wrestling a guy, and one guy who just can't freaking get up, right? So, and I've talked about that in a few of my other videos. It's boring, right? Especially when guys are out wrestling the guy, essentially laying on them, staying busy enough to not get stood up. But man, if you don't have takedown defense and you can't get up, why the fuck would you take damage if you're like a former All-American wrestler, right? And you can just manhandle a guy for 5 rounds. So, but that didn't happen. That happened last fight. And Usman had one of the best, if not the best, knockouts of the night and of all time. Jorge Masvidal has never been knocked out, never finished in the UFC, and got knocked out unconscious. It looked like the punch probably did even more damage than, the Rose to Zhang head kick. I mean, Usman hit Masvidal with a right, overhand right that sent sweat and spit flying everywhere. I mean, pardon my French, was the kind of punch that if that was a street fight, if your life was on the line, I mean, Masvidal would have been 6 feet under in another 5 to 8 seconds. He got knocked out that bad, and I was happy to see it now that my favorite fighter and a guy who I said should be the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, and the last few years, GOAT Khabib is saying should be number one. Now he's validated. For whatever reason, casuals flock to Conor McGregor, who's become a clown, or Masvidal, who I don't want to go too in on him, his martial arts skill or his talent. But like Colby Covington says, he's a journeyman Jorge. He's a journeyman with heavy hands and sometimes creative striking. If, for those of you who don't know, Jorge Masvidal is the guy who has the shortest knockout in UFC history against Ben Askren. If he didn't hit that 1 in a million knee against Ben Askren, he never would have become this guy who the UFC has pushed more than George St. Pierre or John Jones or Demetrius Johnson or Anderson Silva. This guy has gotten pushed so fucking much, not just by the UFC, but he's on ESPN, he's all over the place for a guy who is, like a 500 fighter, a guy who's literally a journeyman with good hands. I think he's 3-3 in his last few fights. I think the rationale with the UFC was he could have a late career resurgence like someone like Michael Bisping or Robbie Lawler, who at one point were, literally journeymen, 500 guys, win a few fights, lose a few fights, who then became champions. But that didn't happen with Masvidal. The one where he got out-wrestled, okay, fair. But now that he got knocked out, got vaporized, starched, whatever adjective you want to, use, to the point where he probably literally took some brain damage, I hope, like a lot of hardcore fans now, that we don't see him pushed as much. We don't see this guy's face everywhere. I don't want to come off as a straight-up hater or hate on this guy, but if you look on YouTube comments or on, MMA leaderboards like Sherdog, a lot of hardcores don't like Masvidal. He's been marketed and pushed like he's the best fucking UFC or MMA fighter of all time, which he isn't. Now, hopefully, the UFC will push people who were on this card, like Valentina Shevchenko, Rose Namajunas, Robert Whittaker, Francis Ngannou. I don't understand the push he's gotten, and I think it's increasingly rubbed hardcore fans or people who actually understand martial arts the wrong way, where this guy has been everywhere for the last few years, and now I hope they scale it back, man, because this guy, after that performance, I mean, he didn't do anything in the first round and then got knocked out cold. It would be one thing if it was another, wrestle-heavy thing, but Usman did the unthinkable. He knocked out a guy who's never been knocked out, and it may sound like I'm going on this guy Masvidal, but man, I hope now they can push legitimate fighters and fighters who are the best in the world, and not some guy who got some 1-second knockout one time, right? It is frustrating them not pushing other fighters who are champs or who are good fighters. I mean, I could see Masvidal losing 2 or 3 of his next fights and being out of the UFC. I don't hate the guy. I don't think he's the worst fighter in the UFC, but for a guy who's gotten the most push out of everyone except Conor McGregor the last few years, he's not a good fighter. He's not deserving of the hype or the casual support, man. Support someone like Francis Ngannou or Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya, Amanda Nunes, someone who's legit, right? Robert Whittaker. Not some fucking guy who had a 1 second knockout and has had a few good one-liners, right? So yeah, hopefully that's the end of Masvidal. So hopefully he doesn't get pushed anymore. It's one thing like a guy like Nate Diaz, a lot of casual support, who has a lot of fans, who's beaten like a prime Jim Miller, or beat Conor McGregor for Conor McGregor's first loss in the UFC. Like, Masvidal is not that dude, man. He's not one of the best fighters in the UFC. He's not one of the best martial artists. He's a guy who, judging by his physique and his last 2 fights, probably doesn't actually train when he doesn't have a fight in the camp coming up. I mean, guy's physique looks pretty shitty for 170 compared to everyone else. So, yeah. Again, he's not my least favorite fighter. I don't think he's a complete scrub, but I'm sure people who really follow MMA will agree, man. Hopefully we can stop fucking seeing this guy's face everywhere and being on ESPN doing interviews when, like, a guy like Francis Ngannou or Amanda Nunes or, anyone else Dustin Poirier, doesn't get his mainstream attention from both the UFC and other people. So, yeah, that's my little rant on Jorge. Hopefully we see less and less of a guy who's 500 in the fucking UFC. So, yeah, that's it. I hope people start watching these videos because of not just my picks, but me kind of calling out the ascension of Kamaru Usman. I mean, Dana White has said now that he might become the best fighter of all time, and I can see it. In addition to his physical gifts, his physical stats, it's more than that now. I follow him on Instagram. He literally trains essentially every day. He's a true martial artist. He's training with Trevor Whitman, who is both Usman and Rose Namajunas' coach. He only trains with a few select fighters, a few of whom train at a major training camp, Elevation Fight Team in Colorado. He works with some of their fighters one-on-one, but Trevor Whitman just handpicks guys and girls who he thinks can be some of the best fighters in the UFC and really trains them up. If Usman's striking keeps getting better, matches his wrestling, it's over. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know if he'll keep fighting if, let's say, he dismantles the next 5 or 6 guys, right? Like Colby, he seems warm to fighting Colby Covington again, regardless of Colby Covington's wild trash talk and persona and stuff, because I think he knows Colby is the only guy who has a snowball's chance in hell. Like Masvidal, Usman almost killed Gilbert Burns when they fought. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson could give him some problems, but Stephen Wonderboy Thompson lost twice to Tyron Woodley, who had a kind of similar build to Usman, a physical specimen, dominant wrestler with heavy hands, so Wonderboy could give Usman a few tough looks, but I think he'll win. Gilbert Burns will just knock out again. So, I mean, it's all on Colby. I don't think Colby will win, but I think he can at least put up some kind of a fight because, man, Masvidal shouldn't have been in there with him in the way in which he got knocked out. It should have been Colby. So, and the thing with Usman, man, he's the most active guy in the division. The rest of the guys in the top 5 and even further back in the top 10 are just sitting, waiting like a carousel to fight the champ. So, man, like Usman was saying in the press conference, some of these welterweights need to step up and show him something, because I don't know who's going to beat him. Like I said, in addition to the physical gifts, there's a lot of guys who are physically gifted and have great physiques. It's more than that at this point. It's him training constantly, being away from his family. I think his family's in Dallas, and he's in Colorado training with Whitman and Justin Gaethje and Rose Namajunas. So, sky's the limit, and I kind of call his ascendancy. Seems like casual fans fall in love with guys who have these stupid fucking one-liners and not people with actual talent. But I think Usman's going to be undeniable. When Dana White, who's not one he praise on you, especially kind of broad strokes praise, is saying you might be the best fighter of all time now, that's saying a ton, because he never says that, right? He's a guy who often has a contentious relationship, even with guys like John Jones or George St. Pierre, 2 of the best fighters ever, when they piss him off. So, yeah. That's UFC 261. One of the, if not the best events in UFC history. We saw three champions, three of the best athletes in the world, really performed to their best. It's a testament. I follow Shevchenko and Usman on Instagram. They train every day. These aren't people with distractions, right? These aren't athletes going to clubs on the weekends or committing crimes on the weekend like some other sports, right? They're dedicated, and it's the whole mindset. If someone who was lifting weights at a high level and doing martial arts like jiu-jitsu at a high level at the same time, I mean, you can get really worn down. I had some vertebrae at the top of my back and neck that were like super aggravated for a few months until I stopped jiu-jitsu for a little bit. So I don't know how they do it. They train every day. Usman went into his last fight with a broken nose. I don't even know if he got it fixed. And he just did the unthinkable. He knocked a guy out cold. In terms of like a knockout that looked like it did real damage for the long run, he did that. And, like I said, I kind of called Usman's ascendancy, and I don't know what's going to happen. Likewise for Shevchenko, if they beat their next 5 or 6 contenders in a row without a challenge, they might just retire. I don't think it's quality over quantity. I think Demetrius Johnson is like 10 or 11 consecutive title offenses, but I don't think they care about that. Usman and Shevchenko, they both said they want to stay in their weight class and defend the belt, and I'd be happy with them. Maybe if they win their next 3 or 4 fights, I mean, maybe just retire. I mean, they're so dominant, they're so well-rounded that I don't know who's going to beat them. Like I said in my last video, sometimes you have champions who are so dominant, like a Matt Hughes back in the day or George St. Pierre, that they have to build up these contenders. Even Joe Rogan said it, and it's like you have to hype up these contenders, but they're going to lose, right? And some UFC champions get up to the point where the only way they're going to lose is if they get caught by a punch early cold, right? And that's it, which is something that literally happened to George St. Pierre, and then he came back and dominated the guy. So, yeah, I hit on 4 or 5. I hope people start watching these videos. Hope they can make some money. And Kamaru Usman's my favorite fighter, and it looks like he could be the best fighter of all time. And when all is said and done, the way he's beating the guys at welterweight, I mean, knocking guys out, you got to rank this guy number 1, and I think he needs his shine. There's someone like Jorge Masvidal, who real MMA or martial arts people aren't high on and don't think much of. For people to be cheering for Masvidal and booing Usman is kind of a joke, right? It's like if you were cheering some scrub quarterback and booing Tom Brady or something like. So, yeah, Usman is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC for men now. And Shevchenko and Rose are probably 2 of the best women's fighters and 2 of the best fighters in UFC history. It was actually funny. A lot of women UFC fighters don't see themselves as women UFC fighters. They see themselves as fighters. Both women's champions, Shevchenko and Rose Namajunas, were asked kind of few blue questions, weird questions like, what's the greatest moment in women's UFC history? Or, as a woman, what do you think of this and this? And they both looked kind of almost offended that they would ask them that and make that distinction between women and men, because if you watch these fights and see the shape that these women come into and their talent and physicality and tenacity, believe me, they don't see themselves as women's fighters. They see themselves as fighters. Almost every woman in the UFC only trained with men, including hard sparring, full contact sparring, or jiu-jitsu sparring. So these women don't see themselves as women fighters. Clarissa Shields, who's the best women's boxer in the world, same thing, only trains with men. And I'm assuming these high-level women's fight sport athletes are beating the shit out of, pro athletes, men's fighters. So I just thought I'd touch upon that because a few reporters asked kind of weird questions to both Namajunas and Shevchenko, and they both did a double take. What does that have to do with anything? What is the best women's moment in MMA history, as opposed to you just dispatched another top women UFC fighter in dominant fashion. So yeah, UFC 261, in terms of the fans being back and the atmosphere and some of the finishes, I think might be like the best event of all time. So yeah. And then I'm gonna make the rest of this video pretty quick. I'm gonna preview UFC Fight Night, Reyes and Prochazka. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. I'm gonna try to bang it out, so it's maybe 50 minutes or just under an hour. So yeah, let me get right into it. It's gonna be almost a come down, having a fight night with like not 3 UFC titles in the line. But yeah, let me get right into it. First in the main card, we have women flyweight of Paulina Botelho versus Luana Carolina. I'm going to go Botelho knockout or submission. For whatever reason in the UFC, almost every first fight on the main card is like usually like a quick knockout or sub. So I'm going to go Botelho flyweight. Next we have men's bantamweight Merab. This guy's a brutal last name to pronounce. Dwavla versus Cody Stamen. Merab, I know, he trains at Saralongo out of Long Island in Nassau County, where I'm from. Merab, definitely an ascending guy, probably like one of the blue chip prospects at bantamweight. He's a guy who up until recently was working as a construction worker full-time while fighting and training for the UFC. So I'm going to go Merab by knockout. Next at middleweight, we have Sean Strickland, 22-3 in MMA, versus Krzysztof Jotko, who's 22-4 in MMA. I know Krzysztof Jotko is from Poland. I know it's one of Joanna Jędrzejczyk's guys. I think she trains with him when she's over in Poland. And these Polish fighters are legit, like Jan Blachowicz. So I'm going to go Jotko by knockout. I think there's going to be a lot of finishes on this card. So first 3 fights by knockout. At light heavyweight, we have Ion Bellow versus Dustin Jacoby. I like Jacoby by knockout. I think this card might be flush knockouts across the board, to be honest. This fight, I think, this card is gonna have a lot of bangers on it. And then featherweight, I've been looking forward to this fight 4 months since it was announced about 6 months ago. Cub Swanskin versus Giga Chikadzki. If I'm thinking of the right guy, I think Giga Kiskaj. Eastern European names are brutal to pronounce. I usually have pretty good pronunciation. Chikadzki. I think he has like legit kickboxing credentials. I think he was like a former world champion in kickboxing or Muay Thai. I think he fought in Glory in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. And versus Cub Swanson, one of my favorite fighters, a real brawler, the guy was just going to go in there and swing in with little regard for his own or his opponent's safety. Cub Swanson has been an absolute bonus machine at featherweight, back from the WEC, which was bought by the UFC back in the day, to the UFC. I think he might have the most bonuses in featherweight history between Fight of the Nights and Performances of the Nights. Probably like one of, if not the most like entertaining fighters of all time. Him or like, I don't know, Robbie Lawler, a guy who or Nate Diaz, a guy who every fight is going to be a fight and it's be fun to watch. I like Swanson by Chikadzki. I know Chikadzki has some crazy kickboxing credentials, but I think Cub is going to make it an MMA fight, maybe use some grappling, mix things up, and Cub Swanson is like literally as seasoned as it gets. I mean, he was fighting in the WEC, which was absorbed into the UFC a long time ago, and he's still here. So I like my guy Cub Swanson over Chikadzki. And then light heavyweight, this fight is very interesting. It's Dominic Reyes versus Jiri Prochazka. Jiri Prochazka was like at one point before he got into the UFC like the best prospect out of the UFC, I think. I gotta look up what country Jiri is from. He had been, the UFC tried to get him into the UFC a few times, and he wanted to stay overseas and developed, which is actually what Israel Adesanya did, and it worked out well for him. This guy, Jiri Prochazka, like I said, the UFC was trying to get him for a while, and he didn't come over. He's a Czech mixed martial artist. He's only 28 years old, specimen. Guy looks like he could fight at heavyweight. God knows how much weight this guy, Prochazka, is gaining and losing to make 205. But he's drawing Dominic Reyes, who a lot of people and myself thought beat John Jones in a title fight. John Jones had 2 fights in a row versus Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes, where he probably lost the fight over 5 rounds. Thiago Santos, it was like, okay, but then like Dominic Reyes beat John Jones in that fight. He clearly won 3 rounds, and then Jones won 2. For whatever reason, John Jones got the split decision. Sometimes it happens with like big names or, you know, big name champions, but Dominic Reyes beat John Jones in that title fight, regardless if he got the official win or not. Really the only guy, Santos too, but Santos, I think you could see it a little more going Jones' way, but Dominic Reyes like really beat John Jones. Should have handed him his first real loss. And I think Jerry Prochazka is an absolute monster, but I'm going to take Dominic Reyes in here. If he can kind of get back to that level he was in when he took it to John Jones and really beat up John Jones, I think he can win this fight. I think Jerry is a real problem. He's a specimen. He's got crazy, scary power, but I think Dominic Reyes, I don't know, I like him in this fight. Reyes has beautiful movement, beautiful kickboxing, very skilled and talented. This might be one where it's kind of like movement and Reyes picking his shots versus Prochazka, who's going to go in there and try to knock him out with one punch. I mean, Reyes, he lost, air quotes, lost to John Jones and then got knocked out by Jan Blachowicz, but Jan Blachowicz went from a guy who was a journeyman to like, he's probably going to end up being a top 2 or 3 light heavyweight in the world. So I think this fight is really going to be the next 205 title challenger after Glover Teixeira fights Jan Blachowicz. So I think these guys are going to come in super motivated, and I think Reyes is going to get the win, either by decision or knockout. I think it's going to come into like volume and movement, and Reyes sticking and moving versus Prochazka looking for a one-punch knockout. Prochazka is like one of these guys he's so well built that he doesn't need volume like Yoel Romero back in the day. He can kind of coast, and then knock you out with one punch bad. So I like Reyes. So yeah, let me break it down top to bottom. I like Butello at women's flyweight. I like Davashvili at bantamweight. I like Krzysztof Jotko at middleweight. I like Dustin Jacoby at light heavyweight. I like Cub Swanson at featherweight. And I like Dom Reyes at light heavyweight to get back on track and possibly fight for the title again. Because, I mean, he got robbed for the actual light heavyweight title. And then lost to Jan Blachowicz, who was one of these guys who, like Masvidal's fans, probably went from a journeyman guy in the UFC, like had an under 500 record, to becoming a dominant champion. And I think this fight is these are the right 2 guys to probably be picked for the next 205 title fight. Anthony Smith, who looked good this past week, should be in the mix, I think. But yeah, that's my predictions. And to wrap things up, yeah, UFC 261, one of the best events of all time, if not maybe the best. If you, like, you know, go back and watch it in a few months or a year or 2 from now. I mean, absolutely electric. And we saw, like, 3 UFC Hall of Famers, 3 champs at the top of their craft with just dominant performances. And it's a testament to the work, that these people put in. Sorry, I thought I heard something in the other room there. But, yeah, and I think I was right in saying that Usman has now ascended to being the best fighter in the UFC, men's number 1 pound for pound. Dana said so, and he said that he thinks Usman could become, you know, maybe the best and most dominant fighter in UFC history. So that's saying something in the shadow of like Khabib, who recently retired, or George St. Pierre, or John Jones. So yeah, UFC 261, one of the best events I've ever seen, and I'm stoked for Kamaru Usman, who now he's ascended. I think people realize he's the best mixed martial artist fighter in the world. Thanks. If you'd like to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.